Let me see if I can turn in my video. Okay, just checking to see if everyone can hear me and if you can see me or see my slide, which is more important.
Yeah, we can see your slide and we can hear you.
Awesome. Okay, so good evening, everyone. Once again, I would say that it's an honor to be here to share with you on the topic for today, courage to create. Courage to create. When Loveth reached out to me on this topic, right? I was wondering, okay, so courage to create, and I was thinking to myself, how does this sound and all of that? And I tried to relate it to technology. It brought up this question in my head that I would like to ask you. You know, you may just think about it or share your thoughts with me in the comment section. I would read through later. And that question is, are career paths in technology more logical than creative? So today you could say, I'm in technology, or so for people that are here today, it's either you're in technology or you're interested in technology and what it has to offer, or you're just like, I just want to know what you're talking about, right? So, and the way technology has been painted to us today, people have different notions about technology. So I'd like to hear from you. You could just drop it in the chat section. Do you think technology is more logical, or career paths in technology, do you think they are more logical than they are creative? Right. I have my thoughts on this and I will share, but I would just like to also read what your thoughts are on this, right? So for me, I would like to say that to start that technology is as logical as it is creative, right? So there are several career paths in technology that would require you to be critical in your thinking. You have to think of the logics of how things work. And it could be what you would call maybe boring to some. Yet, these are things that would also require you to be innovative in what you are looking to do, right? So you could see what we call Internet of Things today, what we even call APIs today, what we even call design thinking today, 3D printing. These are things that, they had to be creatively thought about and put together. So as much as we say that technology is logical, right, we can also see the way design has evolved over the years, right? So technology is creative, and I just want to put it to you today that you can be a part of this, right? So I know my audience has a mix of people who are developers or programmers or techies, and people who are probably aspiring to be. So whether you're new in this field, whether you're one of the grand OGs in this, I would like you to know that technology is creative and logical. So how do I mean? Let's move forward. It takes courage to create. So when we think about creativeness or creativity, we think about people who are maybe artists, people who are painters, or maybe people who mold, who create stuff, right? That was the painters, artists, sculptors, those are people we may look at as they are the creative ones. And that's what you call creative art. Okay, so but how does this relate to us? I like the way Robert introduced and she said, over the past year, we've had to think of new ways to do things. So for people who are in technology today, we would say, okay, prior to the pandemic, people have had to work from home in some cases, but not in all cases. But we see today that over the past year, there's been a very high increase in the number of people who had to work from home as techies. Some of us have not even resumed back to the office, and we may not be resuming back to the regular style of working. Right. So most careers in technology are truly creative. Now, look at a designer, a UX designer. This is someone who would come up with fantastic designs just by thinking through the thought process on the design that has been discussed, and maybe with notes and mock-ups from your product manager. Right. So you're coming up with something that it's so amazing, and it just relates. So if you even look at a web developer or a website designer, you're coming up with something so tangible, and that's one of the first things that got me interested in tech. I remember when I had written my first application that was used by someone. It was an application to register people at an event, and this was me in my fourth year in the university. I had done some programming and all of that, but I was not too sure. But getting to a stage where I could write something and people could use it at an event, it was just so, it was just so amusing and interesting and exciting for me that I was able to achieve that. And that is one of the things that has actually, kept me in this line of tech. I just love to be able to, out of just nothing, with my C# that I know, I'm able to put together, something so beautiful that people could use to actually register themselves. Then we didn't have all the Google Forms as popular as it was at this event, and it was one of those very interesting things to me. Just to checking up, because again, it's a virtual world now. I hope you're with me, right? Okay, I'd like to see that you're with me, and I'm just going to take a second to check the chat section. Okay, to see your responses. It says technology is both logical and creative, because once you start thinking, you start creating what you're thinking about. Amazing. And Ume says that they go hand in hand, because one has to learn to be creative and logical in order to choose a career path. Thank you so much for your contributions. So look at the world's most complicated search engine today, right? You can imagine the amount of code that will go into it. You get to think of codes and you begin to think of heart, because it is so beautiful. You could almost say Google is reading your mind, because by the time you're typing into your Chrome, what's going on? Yeah, I'm just thinking, oh, I want to eat pizza. And I'm saying, where do I order pizza? And it's already showing me this. And I'm like, so were you reading my mind? And it's becoming like an heart to me, right? And this is a lot of lines and lines. These are millions of lines of codes that have gone into creating such a beautiful work of art, right? So it takes courage to create. So when you're in tech, I need you to just appreciate this beauty in tech and what it affords you to be able, to achieve. And then look at someone who is probably a sales manager, a business analyst, or even a product manager today. They have to look at what you're doing and they're thinking of, okay, this is a better way to manage this. And what I want you to know about courage today, right? And I'm going to get to that in my next slide, is this, right? Sorry, I've gone ahead of myself. So you would see this and it's a very nice quote I got from someone you're already seen, but this is it. It says, many of us have frustrations in our daily lives. We dream about solving them, but a few of us actually end up building a company or doing something about it. So how is courage defined in the regular dictionary? According to Google, courage is the ability to do something that frightens one. It is bravery, right? It's being able to deal with strength in the face of pain or grief or an adverse situation. So now, today, I'm sure many of us have things that, if I could ask you, what is one thing you're not really happy about? You would tell me about it. But it's very few of us that actually go on to do something about those things. So courage to create. Imagine when the pandemic started. We could as well just fold our hands and like, well, I'm not going to deal with this. I'm just going to wait it out. Or I could just decide to deal with it and move on. So courage is having to deal with something even when I do not feel, like I want to do this. And this is someone's story I just want to tell you about, because it's just one of the many stories. And today I was not too sure if I wanted to go through showing you stories of women that have inspired me in technology or what and what. But today I just wanted to walk us through a journey. So we started from the journey that, technology is both logical and creative, right? And it takes courage, right, for us to create. So if you're here today, I would say congratulations. So let's see this woman I'm talking about. So I'm sure some of us would have heard of Oprah, the what you would call maybe played for Africa, right? So this is Farah. She's a CTO and yes, co-founder. So she's basically co-founder, she's CEO, she's CTO of Okra, right? And what amazes me is the fact that before she came into the market, we already had the Paystacks, we had the Flutter Waves, we had all of those. But Farah is in the US, she had a baby, and she uses Mint and some of these financial applications in the US. And then she comes back to Nigeria, and it's difficult to find an application that helps you to manage your finances as a lifestyle. And she says, what can I do about it? So this quote I had here previously was actually a quote from an interview that they had with her, right? So Farah goes, and then what does she do? They start a company that, is basically summarized as a super connector. It allows the secure exchange of real-time financial information. Basically, it's an API-based company. Now, API is actually very interesting to me, maybe because I work with APIs a lot and I build APIs and I manage products and API-related stuff. And it's just interesting to me that someone wakes up and thinks, why don't I start this? And this is my challenge to you today, everyone listening to me in this event, right? We've made tech sound very scary for many of us. And then when maybe when you were younger or prior to now, when you hear technology and you're like, whoa, those are for the nerds, those are for the guys that are this certain way and this certain way and this certain way. We've made tech sound very scary. But you know what? It takes courage to put pieces together to form a design. It takes courage to put codes together to make an app or to form an API. It also takes a lot of courage to write codes that will write codes, right? Maybe you're working in the hardware space, maybe you're supporting our services that making sure they're up and running. Maybe you're running the business of technology to keep tech in business. It takes courage to be this and to do this. You may not be a Farah today that has, she looked at the problem in the financial space and decided to, well, I'm going to do something about it. And she raised $1 million in a pre-seed round. That's a lot. That's a lot, right? And it's amazing to see someone do this. And this is just one of the many stories of women in tech doing amazing stuff that you and I can do if we would today build that courage to be more. First, I would say you are courageous enough to be here. Now, being courageous enough to be all that you can be is where your next level is about. So I'll just tell you a little story about imposter syndrome. So let's talk about imposter syndrome. And I'll just use myself as your use case here. So I didn't grow up with a computer. When you ask many people today, what's your story in technology? And they go back to tell you, well, when I was growing up, I had a computer in my home. I played a lot of games. I got interested in all of that. I wasn't that girl. In short, I loved mathematics though. So I wanted to study mathematics in the university. However, I got to study computer engineering I actually chose to study computer, but I got to study computer engineering. And then I had to walk through a journey of not knowing, okay, I'm studying computer engineering, but I'm not even sure what I want to do with it, right? Fast forward and make the story very short. I got interested in programming in my fourth year in university. I'd been doing programming in my classes, but I wasn't too interested. So I got interested. I did some things that were really cool, but I wasn't sure of myself. So fast forward to after uni, before going for my NYC, I had gotten a job because after university, we did some interviews and I got a job in a company in Lagos then. And I was working as a software developer just after school, immediately after school, and I'm not going to serve. And every day, some of those days, I'll be going from my house to the office. I'll be thinking to myself, am I scam? Is this real? Are you sure that, I actually know what I'm doing? And, I've gone from that phase to writing codes. I've been writing for over, at least over 6 years. And it's been an interesting journey. But every time I've had to face another level of imposter syndrome, right? There are times when I'll ask myself, are you sure that this thing you're writing, if you see many memes around programming, they'll tell you some days you feel like he's calm, some days you feel like the boss when you write your codes. And it's amazing that one thing I want to bring out from here for you is the fact that your story is unique. I didn't grow up with a computer in my home, but I was interested in this. I put in my all, well, some days, right? But I put in my best to, learn and then apply what I've learned. And over the years, it's helped me. I've gone on from being a core software developer to getting certified in business analysis to being a product owner, right? Managing API integrations in my current company, right? So technology doesn't have to be boring, right? It doesn't have to be boring. So if you're thinking, I want to join tech, but I'm not so much of this techie, nerdy kind of person. Trust me, there's a place for you in technology today, right? So we're just going to go on to what's next. And that's what I want you to know today. Your story is important, right? Wherever you're coming from, you may be that, I've been into fashion all my life. I've been into maybe something else, maybe education. I really do not know. I've been into maybe law or medicine, and I'm not quite sure where I fit into all of this. The amazing thing about technology is that you can leverage your background to make amazing, amazing, amazing impact in the tech world. So look at flying doctors, right? She's basically a medical person, but they've leveraged technology, and that's what technology is amazing, makes it very amazing. You can leverage technology to do almost anything you need to do. So your story is important. You may not have started with a computer. You may not have had a computer until maybe when you were 20. You may not have seen a computer until whenever. But the point is you can start now and you can create something amazing, right? Just understand where you thrive, know your potentials, and then look for how it applies to technology, right? So you can always find a starting place in technology. All right. So this brings me to one of the many surveys, and if you check online, you see so many surveys about the percentage of women we have in technology. I remember attending my first WTM event in 2015, and it was one of those events that just inspired me and encouraged me to, seeing a community is actually one of the great things that inspire people to keep on doing what they're doing. And I want to give a big shout out to WomenTechmakers and the Google developer community for, keeping on doing what you're doing. It's very inspiring to see because you really do not know how many people you're inspiring to stay in tech or to be in tech. And, with the surveys we have, they will tell you that over the past decade, we've had many more women joining the tech space. However, joining the industry, however, you would see that there are still a very, very low amount or concentration of women in technology. And like I would like you to know today, being in technology doesn't mean you have to be a coder. There's so many aspects, and this is not what this event is about, to tell you different aspects in tech. What do you want to know? Top of my head, I'll tell you could be a quality assurance analyst, you could be an infrastructure person, you could be a cybersecurity person, you could be a business analyst, you could be a product person, you could be a design person, and these are all areas in technology that you could check out. So this percentage is very small, and it's something that we would want more people to look at options in tech that suit you. So how does this affect you today? What is fear? What is fear stopping you from going into? You've been looking at data science all this while, but you're like, oh, well, I really do not know. It's just learning some SQL, learning some R, and these are things that people are beginning to do. I wouldn't want to dwell too much on this, but yeah, we want these numbers to increase, and you definitely have a part to play, even if you are already in technology. So let's see how that is possible. Right. So we just want to see how is it possible for you to increase that number, right? So like I mentioned, you could be in tech or you may just be looking to get into technology, right? Okay, so I think I've gone ahead of myself again. All right. So one way that you could apply courage, or what courage could look like for you, is one, diversifying into technology from a non-technology background. There's so many stories today, and I like to read some of them. If you check out the She Codes Africa page, SCA page, for instance, they have some stories about some ladies coming from different fields into technology. And I love to see it, right? You could do it even within technology. You could transition from one career path to another. So this is what courage may look like for you today. Courage for you may be that you're the only woman in a room. And if you're a woman in tech, this may not be very rare to you. You could see that in some cases, you could be the only woman in your office, you know, you could be the only woman or maybe one of the very few in your office as a woman in tech. So it could be you being that woman, taking a stand, and then opening the door for other women to come in. Now remember, this is for both people who are looking to go into tech and people that are already in technology. You could be a woman in a room, taking a stand for other women and opening the door for other women. So share opportunities with people, right? Don't just owe them to yourselves, and then encourage more people to come into technology. You could also launch innovative ideas and design. There's so many things that people need to do, and technology is an enabler. No matter what field you're coming from, public health, you need technology. You know, there's biotechnology. There's so many things today that people can apply technology to. So you could also contribute to the community or even join a community. Contribute, start, or join a community. This is WTM, right? If you're not a part of the community today, it's something you could look to join. That could be courage for you, you know, stepping out of your comfort zone of being, you know, a one-man army and joining a community to add value and also to learn. Now look at this session today. It's a very interesting one for me because we're looking to learn from each other, network, and, you know, add value to each other. You could also mentor others. So are you a woman in tech? You've been in the space for quite a while. Or as you're even growing, sharing your story about your journey could encourage someone else to join the community, right? So you could contribute by adding value, volunteering, then you could mentor other people, and then you could write stories. So for people who say, oh, I'm art inclined, I like to write, I really do not see me writing codes, do I would write stories more. So yeah, you could write stories about people in tech. You know, the story about technology in Africa is very few people that are talking about it. We only have the, you know, the brands like maybe the Tech Cabal, maybe the Tech Point and the likes talking about it. So why don't we have some woman come up with some innovative way? How can you get more women interested in tech by sharing about tech? You know, those kind of things. These are ways that you could take up courage today and do something new, right? So I'll just go on to check again. I would like to know, are we together? Yeah, just check with us. So are we still together? I can't see my chat section, but I would work with the fact that we're together. So what does courage give you? So we've talked about what courage will look like for you. So what does taking courage, you know, breaking out of that, you know, probably that place where you're scared to be what you want to be. Thank you, so much. I see your response. And, you know, going into, yeah, so I could use myself. I've transitioned recently to product management from cost of development. And it was not probably the most smooth experience because, you know, you have to deal with moving from what you've learned to all this, to something new, but it's always a very interesting journey. And that's what life is about. So embracing courage allows you to see the world from a different perspective. You know, making courage a part of your life equips you with the ability to empower others. So the first one for me is, I could summarize it as innovation. The second one for me is mentoring. And then courage gives you the ability to put aside your fear of failure and take the first steps. So this is for the person that's looking to diversify into technology. Courage is what you need, right, to be able to take that step. Maybe you're already in technology now, you want to enable others. Courage gives you this ability to be able to empower others to do the same. You know, it takes courage to give this keynote speech to, to talk to you, but yeah, this is also courage at work. Like I've said, embracing courage allows you to also see the world from a different perspective. Don't be afraid to own your story. That's what I would like you to know today. Don't be afraid to own your story and your narrative in tech. It's our uniqueness that makes everything and makes life more sweet and smooth. So yeah, this is what courage can give to you. And as a wrap up, I would like to leave you, you know, with these quotes that, you know, is very, I like it. It's a quote I like actually. So I'm just going to leave you with this. It says that the presence of courage does not imply an absence of fear. It simply implies doing whatever you want to do, irrespective of how you feel. So people will say it means do it afraid. So what is it that you need to do today? Do you need to make research for opportunities in tech? Do you need to look out for transferable skills that can take you to your next role? Do you need to actually go out, reach out to mentor some people today, or even get some people to mentor you? What do you need to do? Do you need to tell the not so popular stories of women in tech? Do you need to take a step today? What step are you going to take? Remember, technology is as logical as it is creative. It takes your courage to create, but we've seen what courage can do, right? We see what courage has done for women like Farah. We see what courage is doing for someone like me. And then we can see what courage can do for you. Who knows, when we're meeting in another WomenTechmakers event next year, who knows what you could have achieved in the space of the next 1 year. So I'd like to leave you with this quote. The presence of courage does not imply an absence of fear. It simply implies doing it irrespective of how you feel. Thank you very much.
Oh my, thank you so
often. So thank you for that. Okay, hi, hello everyone. I am so excited to be here and so grateful for the team of organizers for hosting me today. As mentioned, my name is Sierra. I am a mobile engineer in Cincinnati, Ohio, in the United States, where I work for a small consulting firm that specializes in building native applications for clients. Right now, I personally work on a Bluetooth connected device application as part of an IoT platform. But I've been working on Android for about 6 years and am so grateful for being part of a community like this that Google and the rest of the Android community builds up. And so I'm really grateful for that. I'm also a little nervous after that first talk. It was so great. But I think that ML Kit is a really great topic to kind of like move into after talking about creativity and logic, those aspects of technology. Because it lets you build some really creative and cool applications. And so it's been one of my personal favorite packages to explore. And I'm really excited to share how approachable it is for the average mobile developer like me. So let's get started. So first question, what is ML Kit? Given the name, you were absolutely correct. ML is for machine learning. ML Kit brings Google's machine learning expertise to mobile developers in a powerful and easy to use package, as says their documentation. So some things to think about are first that it's optimized for mobile. Using ML Kit means that you can process, the processing is going to happen on device, and that makes it really fast and unlocks real-time use cases for mobile applications like directly processing camera input. It can also work offline, so you don't need to make it a network call to use it. And it can be used for processing images and text that need to remain on the device, so you don't have to send those data points away. It's also built by Google, and that means that you can take advantage of the machine learning technologies that powers Google's own experiences on mobile. But personally, I think the more important takeaway is that it is already built. And so you can get started right away and you don't have to be a machine learning expert. And finally, it is easy to use. I have found this to be true so far, but you can let me know by the end of this presentation if you agree or disagree. So we know what it is, this huge set of packages. So what can it do? The APIs for ML Kit are broken into 2 distinct categories. So first we have the set of vision APIs, and then we also have the set of natural learning APIs. So with the vision APIs, we can do really cool things like facial detection, selfie segmentation, so you can build something like your own personal Snapchat, object tracking, if you want to build like an app to help learn physics and look at like those trajectories. They have an API for that. Text recognition, so you could build something to read credit cards, like some of the banking apps do that can pull that information right off their card and let you use that instead of typing it in. Image labeling, so recognizing different images, different objects in your image. Digital ink recognition, so that you can write on your screen and that can become text. pose detection, if you want to build something for working out and figuring out like what kind of yoga poses they're doing, and barcode scanning for things like building your own grocery store app. So a huge range of options there. And then on the natural language API side of things, we have language ID, so you can hold up your phone and immediately figure out what language you're looking at. Entity extraction, which is if you're sending text messages back and forth or any kind of messages, and dates or places get those underlines that say, hey, do you want to add this to your calendar? Those are entities. And so you can incorporate that into your own messaging apps to pull that out and offer to put it on a calendar or put it on a map. Smart reply. So the terrible replies on LinkedIn, for example, you can write your own app to give you those. And on-device translation. So it can do a lot, and it really opens the door for you to build some really powerful and customized and creative, coming back to the courage to create applications. So that's really great. Who can use this? Everyone can use it. So it is available for both Android and iOS. I am obviously an Android developer, and we're at a Google event, so we're definitely going to go straight down that path and only talk about the Android implementation, but it does also exist for iOS. Beyond being super exciting that all mobile developers can take advantage of this package, it is also exciting because it means that you can probably convince someone to pull it into a production application. A lot of mobile applications care a lot about platform parity between one and the other. And so with MLKit being available for both, it means that you can use it on both platforms and get that same set of features. Sorry, I'm trying to move something so it's out of my way. Okay. And then finally, it is also actually available on Flutter. I double checked this last night. There's also an Firebase MLKit package for Flutter projects. So if you're going down the cross-platform mobile application development route, they've still got you, which is super cool. So today we are going to build an app for our client. Our client's name is Steve. This is the picture of Steve on his tractor out in his yard. As it so happens, Steve is also my father, and he is an avid gardener, and he loves playing out in the yard. And so he has this problem where he buys a lot of plants, plants a lot of plants, and can't always remember what everything is. He also recently can finally describe what I do for work, which is a very exciting step in our relationship as father and daughter. And so he asked, hey, can you build me a mobile app that can help me solve this problem? And because I know about MLKit and image labeling, the answer is yes. And so today, that is what we're going to get started. So we're going to dive into one of these many different APIs that you can use with MLKit. We're going to jump into the image labeling vision API to help Steve identify his plants in real time. So let's get started. I'm not sure what everyone's background is. So just to get everyone up to date on some of the language that we're going to use throughout this process. What you need to know about Steve is that he takes a lot of pictures and screenshots, everything that you send to him. And so I know that he has every picture he needs already on his phone. And so we're going to build him a simple single activity application that's going to let Steve pick an image from his library to get started and then analyze it. For those of you who are not super familiar with Android, we aren't going to spend much time on like the architecture or the UI of the app itself, but here's a quick rundown of what to expect. Architecture-wise, the app really has no architecture. And so for ease of use and understanding, we're just going to put everything into this single activity, all the logic, all the views, everything is going in this one class, so it's really easy to read and find where everything is. And that activity is what is going to hold all of our logic and control the UI. I've already built out the UI that we're going to get started with. It's just a simple constraint layout. And constraint layouts just allow you to constrain different UI elements to each other in the frame of the UI. We will have one image view to hold our image. We're going to have a recycler view, which is the list element for Android. That's going to have our list of labels. And then we have a couple of buttons to guide Steve through using this app. He needs some very direct instructions. Okay, so let's get started. In Android, we manage our dependencies using Gradle or Kotlin DSL. In this case, I'm using Gradle. So there are two different ways to add this image labeling dependency to our project. The first way is to bundle the model with our application. And so that's that first dependency, the image labeling 17.0.2. Or we can also dynamically download the model in the Google Play services. The second way will make our app a little smaller, which for some apps we care about a lot, but it also depends on your network availability. Within that, you can also decide whether to install it immediately when they install your app, or only download it when they're actually using it. Since we are building this for my father and he is technologically challenged and I don't want anything to mess up for him, I have opted to just bundle the model with my app. I'm not going to care a lot about the size of my app right now. Second, we're also just going to start with the base model to kind of get us started, kick us off. The base model has about 460 labels that we can just use out of the box that's available from Google that they've already trained this model on. And you can see some of those different choices, some really random ones in this list, just a small selection. This list is built to be very general and a varied list of words so that you can use it out of the box for almost any app and get back some kind of meaningful labels. And so hopefully we find that to be true. You can find the full list of these 460 labels online in the ML kit documentation. All right, so we have our dependency. We've decided what model we're going to get started with. And so now we can go ahead and start adding code to our activity. So like I said, the first thing we're going to have to do is let Steve pick an image from his photos. And so what we're going to do is start a activity for result. In Android, activity for result is going to let you go out to a different app and come back with some kind of result. And so in this case, we're going to have an intent that for images, and our action is going to be get content because we're going to go out and select that photo. So we're going to get that content. We also have to add a request ID, which is just an integer, so that when it comes back, we know which activity result has come back. So when we start this activity for result, we also want to override the function on activity result so that when it comes back, the second method gets called. And so when that request comes back, we check that the request code is correct, and then we check that the result code is correct, so it came back okay. And so when we do that with the image and the content selection, it's going to give us back the image URI to select our photo. And so we can pull that data out of the data that comes back. So we have that data.data. And then we're going to pass that into our next function. So now we have our image URI. So the second thing that we need to do is we're going to transform this URI into a bitmap so that we can use it. So why did we choose a bitmap? There's actually several different types of image processes that we could use later down the road. The reason that we picked image is that it actually ends up being the most efficient, but also it's something that most folks are familiar with, and we can also use it to set our preview. So it gives us a couple different things that we end up wanting anyways. So in our set preview, we take that image URI and we can get our bitmap from our image URI using a content resolver that goes out and pulls that URI, it decodes the file, and it returns our image from the bitmap factory as a bitmap. Once we have that bitmap, we can also set our preview. I'm gonna hang on right here. I realize that QA is coming in. I'll open that up. You will have the material from the seminar. I will have a link at the end. Okay, and so we go ahead and set our image. We have our bitmap. We're good to go. Let's keep going. So now that we have this bitmap, we can jump into the actual ML code. Everything else so far has just been pulling images, processing them, things that you do anyways when you need images in Android. So we can convert. So the first thing that we're going to do is take this bitmap and we can convert that into the image input that the image labeler needs by calling input image.from bitmap and passing in our bitmap. So this is where we could have used one of those different functions. There are several different input images.from something, including from a URI. So we actually didn't have to change it at all. But since we wanted to preview that images, we might as well. And the from bitmap, the second argument that's currently set to 0 is the rotation. I'm just going to assume all my images are in the correct orientation and not mess with that. So no more image manipulation. The only things that you can pass into there are going to be 0, 90, 180, or 360. So there's a specific set of rotations that you can pass in. Then we're going to create our on-device image labeler object. In this case, we're using the default options. And so we can see image labeler options.default options, but there are things that you can build and pass in there ourselves. So for example, we could pass in a confidence threshold. So we don't want anything under 75% confidence. We only want things that they're very sure are in our image. Right now, we're just going to take everything. We're taking everything back to our recycler view. I think there's actually things on this slide, the things I'm saying. So finally, we have our image labeler, we have our image input, and so we're going to pass our input image object into the image labeler's process method. This process method is going to return a task that will return an async list. Notably, it is not the async task that was deprecated from Android, although it is a task that will return asynchronously. And so to handle that asynchronous return, we add an onSuccess listener to handle our list when it comes back and is successful, and add an onFailure listener for when it doesn't. I have a lot of things. Okay, so in this case, we've already seen what our app is going to look like on the end. And so when we get back this onSuccess, we're going to get back a list of labels. And so all we're going to do is pass that list of labels into an adapter to put those in our recycler view. And so we see that labels in this Lambda function being passed into some UI management. And so inside our adapter, we have a bind function to bind these different labels to our UIs for each row. And so each image label is going to give back a text that's a string, a confidence, which is how confident it is that label is actually in our image, that's a float, and an index, which is an integer. The index and the text are actually the same thing. So if we think back to our base model, each one of those labels has a number associated with it. And so the index will map directly to that same text. It's just two different ways to say the exact same thing. And so for our simple example, we're pretty much good to go. Let's try it out. So I select an image from my image library that Steve has sent to me of his backyard, and then I process it. And within milliseconds, we get back a list of different labels. And so in this case, Google thinks that there are petals, absolutely, with a 95% confidence. Flowers, they think it's a forest. They think there's a jungle. So we have all kinds of different labels, but it's important to notice that even without doing anything out of the box, it picked out all these different plant type labels. And so that's really exciting. It's also worth noting that Steve would be ecstatic that Google recognized his backyard as a jungle, because that's definitely the vibe that he's going for. So cool, that's awesome. In 19-minute presentation, we went from beginning to end of getting MLKit set up with the basic model and getting it working. So that is a very incredible timeline. So where do we want to go from here? So wow, we got all these plant labels back, these really cool ones, forest, jungle, things Steve would love. They're probably not specific enough to take this model out and use it in his yard to figure out what kind of plants these actually are. And so it'd be really cool if we could give Steve an app that's a little bit more specific and maybe make a custom data model to label his specific plants. Using custom models is going to give you a lot of the same benefits that MLKit in general does. It's going to be easy to use, very similar to what we've already seen. I think it's very easy to use, so those new APIs will be easy to work with. It will still handle the label mapping for you from extracting the labels and then applying this to your image. You can host your model on Firebase, so you can still, if you wanted to, get that, not package it with your application and pull it down dynamically. And so we can get started in a really similar way. Before we jump too far into this, let me give you the quick summary of what this will not be. I am a mobile developer, and I can answer all your deep and pressing questions about Android development. But I am not a machine learning expert. And so we're going to talk about these things at the level that I wanted to know about them to use them effectively in mobile applications. And we're definitely not going to dive super deep into how these models work. And I hope that maybe if there's an expert thing, give that presentation next time. So with that caveat, let's do it. So how are we going to get started with custom models? The docs tell us that to use custom models for MLKit, there are 4 different ways that we can get started creating a custom model. We can use TensorFlow Hub, TensorFlow, AutoML Vision Edge, or TensorFlow Model Maker. So let's look at some of the differences between these different options and decide what's going to work best for us. So first, TensorFlow Hub. TensorFlow Hub is kind of like a GitHub for all of these different TensorFlow models, where you can go out and find a wide range of pre-trained models that are built from different creators from around the world, and you can just download those and use them. On TensorFlow Hub, you can go and filter out models that are MLKit compatible, because they do have certain requirements that have to be there to be used in MLKit. The criteria, and I'm only going over this because it'll pop back up a little bit later, to be compatible in MLKit, for the input, it has to be an RGB format. The data is either an int or a 32 type float. And there's a 4-dimensional tensor that is going to be the batch by the height, by the width, and a channel, the expected number of channels. In mobile, that has to be 3. And then the output tensor is either a 2 or 4-dimensional tensor. To be fair, that going to TensorFlow Hub means that you can use a custom model, but it doesn't mean that you're going to be using your own custom model. And so we're going to jump on and look at some of the other options for us. For TensorFlow, you can train a model with TensorFlow and then convert it to a TensorFlow Lite. This might be useful if you already have a TensorFlow image classification model, and then you want to reuse that in your mobile application. And then there's converters available between the two. That's relatively simple using some Python APIs. I don't have a TensorFlow model. I'm getting started from scratch, so I'm also going to skip this option. AutoML Vision Edge is offered through the Google Cloud AI. And so the basic steps for doing this is that you're just going to send a huge chunk of images up to Google Cloud Storage, and then also add in a listing of the images to their labels. And then AutoML can run through those, take your data set, train a model, and then make a prediction. And then you can export that and deploy your AutoML Vision Edge model and use that in your mobile application as well. And those APIs from Google Cloud AI are also can also be downloaded and then uploaded into a Firebase model, just like we've already talked about. Finally, TensorFlow Lite Model Maker. This model maker is going to retrain a model, which is known as transfer learning and takes less time and less data than training a model from scratch. During training, this image classification model is fed a bunch of images and their labels, and then where each label is going to be a unique concept. So that's how that image training works. Right now, it's going to support 2 use cases, image classification and text classification, which is good enough for us. We're looking for image classification. And so today, we're going to use this model maker. And specifically, we're going to use this model maker that's a Google Colab for image classification with TensorFlow Lite Model Maker. And the reason that I chose this, and again, you'll have access to these slides, is that it goes line by line through getting you started with making and exporting your model. So really great choice. So if you were to open this link, you'll find that it is a Python notebook. So it's a Jupyter notebook. If you don't know anything about Python, I know very little about Python. That's totally okay. Again, all the code is there. And so you really just have to run it line by line, which is a great place to get started for beginners. Python notebooks are just like a virtual environment for Python that you can kind of run your Python code. These notebooks are going to go line by line to let you run each line of code separately and look at the output. And it's just this interactive computational environment. The first 2 lines that you're going to see are pip installing this TensorFlow Lite Model Maker, which is just going to install a bunch of dependencies that you're going to need to run everything below that. If you wanted to go look at that full list, it's available on GitHub, but it's going to install some like math libraries for Python, and then also some TensorFlow libraries. And then the second line is just importing the things that you need explicitly into this file. So now everything's installed, just like when you put everything in your Gradle, and now you have to actually import them into your file. So it just how happens that Google has a large data set of flowers that are publicly available, and that we can use that to get started with our plant identification app. And so the first thing that we're going to do is go and grab all those images from this Google storage and pass in that into this Git file inside the TensorFlow package. So these 4 lines are all that we really need to build our model, which is so exciting. The first thing that we're going to do is we're going to load all our data. We're going to use this image classifier data loader class to load the data in from our image path that we just pulled down that URL for. And then this is going to print out a bunch of information that's really helpful for us. And so in this case, this this giant package of images from Google on flowers has 3,670 different images and 5 different labels. So we're starting with daisy, dandelion, roses, sunflowers, and tulips. The next thing that we're going to do is we're going to split our data up. We're going to have 90% of those 3,670 as training data to train our new model. And then the other 10% will be test data to evaluate the accuracy of our model. In this line, the magic happens. We are going to create our custom image classifier model from our training data. And then we will feed in that test data that we pulled apart from our original data to test the accuracy and evaluate the accuracy of the model. In this case, this model ends up being about 92% accurate. And then we can, boom, we're done. We can export that model. And we're good to go. I wanted to briefly, very briefly, this is the most ML talk you're going to get for the rest of the day, talk about this specific line. This image classifier.create is really the critical piece of all the code that we have there. This is actually where we're going to do the transfer learning with the pre-trained model to create our new custom model. I included a link on this slide to go to a link that actually goes through what's happening in this create or something really similar from the TensorFlow website, because it's a complicated process. But basically, very basically, what's going to happen is we're going to send in all this training data. It's going to split it up inside the create model into more training data, validation and testing. Those are all set to default as is. I'm passing in no specific parameters. It's also going to download an image feature vector, which is going to be the base of our base model from TensorFlow Hub. So we still don't get out of using TensorFlow Hub, even though we skipped it a little bit earlier. An image feature vector is a dense 1D tensor that represents the whole image. The default for this particular call is going to be an efficient net light 0 model, but there are many other models that you can pick from, including MobileNet v2, ResNet, and there are actually 5 different efficient net models going from 0 to 4. Reasons to pick one versus the other can depend on your use case, depending on what kind of trade-offs you want for speed versus accuracy. If you're doing something simple like what we're doing, we probably don't care that much about accuracy. But if you were doing something like using ML to identify medical images, you would probably pick a model that might give you higher accuracy and maybe care about time a little bit less. Efficient Net is a good choice for mobile because it was built for mobile and IoT edge devices. And so it's quick, and accurate. And so the trade-offs between accuracy and latency are very good for this model. Then it's going to do a lot of machine learning things. It's going to mess with a dropout rate to make sure that it doesn't try to overfit. It's going to go through a bunch of different batch sizes to size out your, pull out your data. And then it will eventually feed you back your model. There's a lot of things that you can mess with on this specific line. You could add more steps to the create training, and that can give you better accuracy, but will take, again, a little bit longer. And it will eventually converge so that adding more step size doesn't do anything. There's only like a line where it hits. You can change the batch sizes, which is the number of images that it uses per one training step. You can change the learning rate, which is how quick it will try to go. And there's a momentum variable that you can also change in that will try to change how optimized your model is. It's a lot of information, and so I really recommend going out and reading more about transfer learning if you're interested in diving deeper into what this specific step does. It's definitely not required to start using MLKit in even custom MLKit models in your app. So we've downloaded our model. We're good to go. How are we going to use this in our mobile app? So the part that I'm more knowledgeable of. So the first step is we just have to pull it in. So at your app level, you can right click on that app level and add a new other file. And at the very, very bottom, one of the last things you can pick, there is a TensorFlow Lite model. And that is going to take us right into the TensorFlow Lite model wizard. And so you can go out, you can find your model location. Mine was in the downloads, and I have renamed it Flower model. It comes back from our model maker is just model.TensorFlow Lite. I've also selected to automatically add my build features to my dependencies to my build.Gradle. And so once I do those two things, I can just push finish. And once I do this, we can look at our project and kind of look at the diffs that we have after we did that. And we'll notice a couple of different things. First, there's a new package in our project structure. So we still have everything that we usually see inside an Android application. So we have our app at the top level, and then we have like our Java that holds actually all our Kotlin code. We have our res folder that holds all our resources. And now we will also have an ML package that is going to just hold our TensorFlow Lite models. We'll also see that, as expected, our build Gradle was automatically updated with some build features, and you'll need to sync after that. So first, we'll notice that we have a new build feature that is ML model binding set to true. This is also going to be where you add things like view binding and data binding. So all of those are considered build features. The ML model binding makes it easier for you to directly import these files, these model files, and use them in your projects. Then we also pull in these two dependencies. So we have the TensorFlow Lite support library and the TensorFlow Lite metadata library. The support library is just going to be a cross-platform library that helps deploy TensorFlow Lite models onto mobile devices. And then the TensorFlow Lite metadata library is going to include both human and machine readable information about what the model does and how we're going to use it. So once you finish that wizard, you're going to be dropped right onto the UI representation of your TensorFlow Lite model in the application. And that is going to look like this model, tensors, and sample flow. So also, if you navigate away from this screen and ever double click on your TensorFlow Lite model to jump back into it, this is also the page that you'll land on. So this is that human readable version of the metadata to give you some information about your model, what it does, and how to use it. So a couple of things here. First, we see that the model that we use for our transfer learning model is that EfficientNet Lite 0. So that model that we just talked about is our base model. We see that here. That would be updated if you decide to pass in a different model into that create function. We've also seen that it automatically adds a description that says it's going to identify the prominent images of a set of 5 labels. And those 5 labels go back to what we saw when we pulled in and downloaded all those images from the image classification data loader. They also stole our authorship because really we together just authored this brand new model. And then also we can look at our inputs and outputs, and we notice that those are going to relate back to those requirements for a TensorFlow Lite model in a mobile application. So we see that our input has that float 32, 3 channels, red, blue, green, and then also that 4-dimensional tensor shape, 1 batch, height, width, and 3 channel sizes. And then we also see our output is a 2-dimensional TensorFlow or tensor, where the criteria said it had to be 1 or 4, or 2 or 4. Ours is 2, and that second is the number of labels that we have. And so it's going to return an output called a probability. We did it. It's there. We can use it. So now we can use our new model and replace our old model. We've already done all the work to pull in those images. We're good to go there. And so now we can just immediately use our bitmap that we've already converted. We've already talked about it. This time we're going to convert our bitmap into a tensor image instead of that image input. And so we'll just do tensor image.fromBitmap and pass in our bitmap. We'll then create a model from our new flower model. So it will have that same name of what your model is called, flowerModel.newInstance. And then we get to process really similarly. And so this time we'll have flowerModel.process and we'll pass in our tensor image. Unlike the old one, this does not return that task. It's just going to immediately return your list of probabilities. It has an extension function that we can turn those into categories. So we'll take our probabilities, we'll convert it into something usable, this category list, and then we're going to sort it by its score. And then again, we'll use that exact same UI code to display those labels in our UI. In this case, we're going to bind our categories. Categories are going to come back with a label and a confidence. We can try it out. And so with that, we can select our image. I pull down a picture of a sunflower. Boom, 96.59% confident that we have a sunflower with our new flower model. We can also try that on our original image in my dad's backyard. And when we process that, we get some confidence that maybe a little bit of everything is there. It's not a super great image to identify one prominent object. So yes, we did this. We have 5 different labels. We can label these 5 different flowers. So what happens if we want to add a 6 label, specifically this one? This is a picture from my dad's backyard that's a little bit more specific. And I happen to know that it's a Kana's flower. And so if we open up that file of images that we use the first time, we find out that that flower photos contains 5 different subfolders, each one named, and those names relate directly back to our labels that it pulled out. And so all I really have to do is add a new folder and add a bunch of images. And so that's what I did. I downloaded a ton of images of these flowers. I added it to that folder. I zipped that folder back up. And then inside our Python notebook, we can actually go and upload our own images to run that entire classification again without any changes or very minimal changes. So I uploaded my flowers new zip folder from my desktop into this Python notebook. And then all I had to do was update the name and update the path to the image to file content / this new flower folder. And then run my 4 commands to load, create, test, and export. And with that, and then upload it into Android Studio, I can now run it with my own personal custom model that I have actually contributed to in my mobile application. So now I'm going to go in and select that image and process it. And with 47.6% confidence, it knows that that is the correct flower. You might notice that that is unusually low in comparison to our sunflowers. And the reason for that is number 1, Steve is really bad at taking photos. I'm just going to blame him for that one. And second, it's because I did a terrible, terrible job scraping pictures for this and was very lazy. And so I only actually used about 20 and then just copy and pasted them several times into the folder to get enough to run the model. There are lots of tools that you can scrape images from online, and I just didn't do that step. So I know how to improve it if I wanted to make it a little bit better for Steve to use out in the yard. So where do we go from here? I messed up that animation. So we're done. We did our custom models. It would be really nice if we could use a camera so that I don't have to load images. Turns out this is actually really tricky because it has a lot of frustrating bitmap code. And so if you want to do it, I have done it out on GitHub. I am not going to step through it because it just is a lot of image manipulation, bitmap manipulation, and it's very frustrating. But the basic steps are here is that you're just going to have to add those dependencies for the camera lifecycle, and the camera views to your build Gradle. Then you'll actually have to add permissions to your manifest to ask the user if you're allowed to use their camera. And then once we have those permissions accepted, we can add some code to the activity to process that image. The basics here are that we're going to have this process camera provider and an image analyzer that comes from building this image analysis class. And we bind those two together to build this. And as the camera changes, constantly be sending images into our flower model. And then we just take those labels, the exact same thing. I actually extract that same function right out of where I used it before to use it in both places. And we display those right in our image view. You can find this out on my GitHub on a branch named ml-kit-camera if you do want to dive deeper into how to use the camera. And with running on that branch, we can run this code, and we can see that as I move around my very fake flower images on my computer screen, we see that can accurately jump around and get the correct flower image. So that's really cool. Counting that as complete, we have our custom model. We can use a camera, and so we don't have to automatically load images. So some places to go here. It might be nice to add an overlay to actually label which image we're associating that label with. This is actually done in the ML-Kit example app from Google. So there's also code available for you if that's something that you're interested in. I am personally really excited about Jetpack Compose. I think it's super cool. So on my to-do list will be rewrite almost all of my example apps in Jetpack Compose for good practice. And finally, I have to convince my dad to use an Android phone so that he can use my app. And this is almost definitely the most challenging of all these things. So finally, having gone through all that, it's my final reminder that when using ML for anything, is that with great power comes great responsibility. This is a really cool package, but we aren't doing any of the training ourselves behind the scenes. That's all being done for us. And so just with any any ML model, you have to be mindful of the potential impact that your app may have. And so thank you so much for hosting me. This code is out on my GitHub, Sierra O'Brien. I have an example repo pinned to the top of my GitHub that has a bunch of different interesting Android things I've messed around with, but the ML Kit Vision is one of those projects. If you want to get in touch with me, you can find me on Twitter at _Sierra O'Brien, or a whole host of ways to get in touch with me at sierraobrien.com. And that's it for me.
You still have some hidden slides you're going to see.
Do I have what?
I was wondering if you have
Oh,
some
no, I don't
hidden
have
slides.
any hidden slides. I thought about it. I thought about pulling those cameras as hidden slides.
I know, right?
I didn't. I was like, there.
Oh my, thank you so much, Sierra. I really enjoyed your talk. I'm a mobile app developer with Flutter.
So let me know if you cannot see my slides. Hi, I'm Tamar Rusham. Until just recently, I was the CEO and founder of Parent Scheduler. I actually recently closed my startup, and I might be joining a different startup as CTO in the next coming weeks. And I really strongly support Esther's talk at the beginning of courage, because even if you don't end up where you thought you would, you're still going on a journey and you might get to very cool places. So today I wanted to talk about how to promote your career remotely. You know, we've been in the world of COVID for a while now, and more companies are moving to be fully remote and have fully remote positions. And I think it's a great opportunity. So before I dive into all of that, let me just talk a little bit. Wait, how do I move? It's not moving. Tell you a little bit about how I started working remotely. So I've been a software engineer for almost 15 years now, and I used to live in the States, in Boston, and I worked there in an office because, you know, that's what everybody did. And then after I moved back to Israel, I continued working as a freelance for the American company for a little bit, but I didn't actually enjoy it. I was working by myself and it was kind of hard. And I was thinking, you know, maybe I should find a new position, an office to work at. And then a friend of mine reached out and said, hey, maybe you're looking for a job because they're looking for engineers at the team I'm working at. I'm like, okay, sure, why not? That sounds cool. And I joined GoDaddy. But the interesting bit is that GoDaddy doesn't have, GoDaddy, if you know, it's one of the world's largest websites for domain registration and web hosting. And the interesting part is that GoDaddy doesn't have offices in Israel, where I live. And what I actually joined is a small startup a couple of months after it's been purchased by GoDaddy. And that small startup never had offices. It's a pretty incredible story, I always thought, because this very successful startup was built 100% remote. And the entire team was spread across the world. We had people from Europe, people from Israel, people from Africa, had people obviously in North America. And we all built, there was this culture built around working remotely. And I joined that team and I've been working remotely since. It's been almost 7 years now. And I worked in GoDaddy for a few years. And then as a software engineer. And then after a couple of years, I got a project to run by myself to start doing some prototyping and initial exploration. And then once that project became successful, actually more people joined and I became a team lead. So my career advanced from being an engineer to being an engineering manager completely remotely, and I managed the team remotely. And after the project was out worldwide with thousands of daily users, I decided to set out and start my startup. And now I'm doing yet another transition into being a CTO. And all that until now has been done remotely. So even before COVID, I've always been a very a strong advocate for working remotely. So how about I talk a little bit about why I love working remotely? Because I know a lot of people in the last year and a half that we've been thrown into working from home have struggled with it. And I think part of the struggle is because, most companies didn't have the infrastructure. We weren't set up for it. And not to mention, if you're a parent like myself, it's very different trying to work from home when your kids are at home as well, if there's lockdown, for example. But I do love working remotely, and I do hope that the world, and I do think that the world is embracing it more, because working remotely, while you do miss some of the more social aspects, like having lunch together, you get to learn a lot about yourself on the one hand, and you also have a lot of new opportunities open for you. So on the one hand, I learned that if I'm stuck on a very hard technical problem, it actually helps me to go and take a shower, do some yoga, take a walk outside, do a cycling, make lunch, put a load of laundry. It doesn't actually matter, but truly step away from my computer and then come back to it. It also allows me to have a fully flexible schedule. So as a mom, if I need to leave early, and because our team, when I was working for GoDaddy, was globally spread. So nobody kept track of the hours. Nobody cared how many hours when I logged in and when I logged out, and it didn't matter. What mattered is my work. And if I worked more efficiently by doing 3 hours in the morning and 3 hours in the early afternoon and another 3 hours in the evening, then that's what I did. And that was fine. And it helped me learn how I work best. And working from an office isn't always where you work best because there are more distractions in the office. And last but not least, when you work remotely, the options you have, the companies you can work for, it increases dramatically, right? You can find yourself, like me, working for an American company from Israel. And I won't say it's not without its challenges, working remotely in general and working across time zones specifically, but it gives so much freedom and flexibility into your life that I think it would be a hard loss to now give it up. So that's a little bit about why I love remote work. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the whole process of how to go about finding a work remotely, how to interview remotely, start a job remotely, and about how to promote your career remotely, because all of that is slightly different. And I think that's something that we've all learned in the past year, and everybody who works from home has to learn. It's different working remotely, and I'll talk about the different aspects of it in the different stages. And then if we have a little bit of time, I don't know if we have managers here or even for you to bring into your own teams, I would love to also bring a little bit of perspective of managing a team remotely and what you can do as a manager or what you can promote in your team in order to have a better teamwork within a team that works remotely. So how to go about finding a remote job? Well, there are websites that are specifically for remote jobs. So Stack Overflow has the Stack Overflow jobs, and you can specify remote only. There is AngelList. There is Hacker OK, I think, if I'm not mistaken. Anyone that's interested, I'm happy to send a list later. And make sure in your CV, in your resume, to highlight your communication skills, to highlight your special strengths for working remotely, and some of the things that we'll talk about today. So you don't have to do just either or. You can search for both. You can search for both a local job and a remote job, but usually remote jobs will be posted in places specific to remote jobs. So, go and find these places. And again, like I said, I got to my first remote job through a friend. So also invest in the community. Connect to online communities of women engineers or engineers in general. I personally find the women engineer groups to be far more helpful and supportive, but maybe I'm just not in the right general groups. But do create those online connections and increase your remote connections to other communities, and that can also help you with finding a remote job. So a couple of points about interviewing remotely. First of all, from a purely practical perspective, open your camera beforehand and take a look at how it looks. So this lighting, for example, is not the greatest. If you want to improve the lighting, it's better if you have the lighting behind the camera. So my face now is kind of like half in light and half in dark. It's better if you have it behind the camera, and try and have the camera about your eye level, and avoid having an external camera. So try and use either the built-in camera of a laptop or a camera right on top of the screen, so it doesn't seem like you're constantly looking to the side. Another thing is to kind of take a look at your background and make sure that you're okay with, whatever is showing. I mean, we know it's home. We don't expect it to be an office-like environment, but more for you. Just before this call, I turned on this talk, I turned on my camera and I realized I had this whole laundry thing going on. I was like, oh yeah, let me push it down or something, so people don't have to so I don't have to feel like it's drawing people's eyes or distracting. I will get distracted. So make sure that there's nothing there that will distract you while you're interviewing. And yes, even if your background isn't great or amazing, I still really recommend opening the camera. And that leads me to my next point. So when you're interviewing remotely, or later when I talk about having remote meetings, or even in this remote meetup, you don't get this immediate feedback that you get in a live event or in a one-on-one, like a face-to-face meeting. I don't get to see your faces. I don't know if anybody's listening, and it makes it harder. So always make sure to open your cameras so people can see you, they can see your expressions, and pay closer attention to the video that you're watching, to the interviewer, to the images of the people that are interviewing you, and try and be more attentive to the cues that they're giving you. Are they interested? Are they engaged? Are they listening? Are they more distracted? And if they're more distracted, then maybe you can find ways of re-engaging them or focusing your answer, just as you would in a face-to-face interview. But you have to invest more effort in order to do this interview remotely, and make sure that people are still following you and are still in touch with what you're saying. So those are kind of my practical tips on interviewing remotely. And that really will tie back when I talk about when you work remotely, because all of these video things are going to come back and be even more important when you want to have a team, or have a team that's working completely remotely. But before we get to the interview, let's talk about onboarding, because it is different to start a position fully remote versus an office job. Because again, you don't have this immediate connection to the other team members. You don't have this immediate feedback from your manager. You won't have hallway conversations and lunchtime and water cooler and coffees, whatever, when everybody gangs up around the coffee machine in the morning. So when you onboard to a remote position, And again, this is like the thread that flows through this entire talk. The most important thing is you have to pay close attention to communicating, and communicating more explicitly. Make sure to reach out to people in your team, to get to know them, to create a direct bond with them. It is harder to bond with people that you've never met face to face. So try and make a little bit of the conversation about their day, your day. Say something about yourself that's outside of this little screen. Because if we were in an office, all of this will happen naturally. And it's when we're doing it remotely, we have to invest the extra energy into creating that connection. And when you onboard to a remote team, you have to be, when you start a new position, it's hard to start a new position. And it's hard because you don't know what's happening. It's very stressful. Everybody's freaked out. I told that to my mom the other day. She started a new position, actually. And she was like, I thought by now I'd have everything down and I'd figure everything out. And I'm still feeling like I'm chasing myself and I don't know what's happening and I still don't understand a lot. And I told her, but this is how it goes. When you start a new position, you always feel the first few weeks, the first few months, that you don't know what's happening and that you don't want to come across as a complete idiot. And it's very hard to ask someone, oh, can you help me set this up? But it's hard in general, but it's even harder when it's remote, because you can't just, psst, psst, to the person next to you and be like, why is this not installing? Like, how do I install this thing? It's not working. So you have to be more forward. Like, I'm not saying that you have to, like, if you're shy, then you're not going to do well in a remote position. Not at all. I've worked with a lot of introverts in a remote position. And that actually, again, working from home can actually be really great for people who are more shy. But you do have to communicate if you're getting stuck, if you need help. And that happens especially at the beginning, but will also be true later when you're just working as part of a team, to communicate that, oh, I need help. And if you've onboarded to a new team and your manager doesn't have a regular one-on-one with you, or if you are already working in a regular on a remote team and you don't have one-on-ones with your boss, I always think it's a good idea to ask or to try and get, just regular FaceTime one-on-one with your boss, just so that they get to know you a little, you get to know them a little, and you get a little more feedback, because it's harder to get that feedback when you're working remotely. And now, I think that's kind of like the core of it, is a lot of like the important aspects of working remotely. So before I get to like communications and practical tips, I want to touch on boundaries, actually, which is something that's sometimes harder to set when you're working remotely. When you work remotely, it's the separation between my home and my work, it becomes blurred. And I know that in a lot of companies and for a lot of people, they stop feeling like it's okay to not respond to a message at 7 p.m. or 8 p.m. even, because I saw it and I'm at home, yes, but I'm also in the office in a way. And it's harder sometimes to set the boundary, but I want to talk about how important it is. I'm not going to talk about like, if you have a boss that doesn't know how to respect boundaries, that's a problem on its own. But what I've seen around me is that a lot of people themselves have the problem of separating it. So I highly recommend that you pick a corner that is your work corner. For the first few years of me working remotely, I worked on my kitchen table, and it was really hard because I constantly had to move, and now it's dinner, and now where do I put my laptop, and now, oh my God, if something spilled on my work laptop, that would be terrible. And the separation is harder because there is no place. And then in the last few years, I've created this study area, and this is my place. and I sit in it. When I sit in it, I work. When I get up, I'm no longer working, and I don't just do something small. I hardly ever take the work laptop into my living room or to other rooms or work from bed. Now, I'm saying this because I've seen how much strain it causes for people that can't create this boundary. But part of the beauty that I talked about working remotely is figuring out what works for you. So everything I say isn't like a complete truth, but it's something that I've seen both in people I worked with, both for myself and for other people. In general, it's really it's much better, and you'll be much more productive if you create a boundary and say, now is work time and now is personal time. And when you work from an office, it just happens, right? When you're in the office, then you're working. And when you're not in the office, then you're not working because you're not in the office. But when you work remotely, you have to actively create that boundary. And that boundary is really important for maintaining long-term motivation and morale. Like, you're just going to burn out if you don't create those boundaries. The second aspect, and that's the one I've been kind of mentioning and touching upon in all of the different aspects of it, is the communication. So how I've mentioned the video in interviews, that's also true for meetings. So there was a point in time in my team where we kind of all gotten in the habit of not turning on the camera because I don't want to worry about how I look, and maybe I'm busy like stuffing my face with food or maybe I didn't wear a nice enough shirt, or I don't know, maybe I am tired and just sitting on the sofa and kids are running around. And while we all felt that, we all had discussion and realized that it damaged our communication. It made meetings harder. It's harder to talk when you don't know if anyone's listening. It's harder to keep yourself focused when your camera is not on. It's a very interesting, weird psychological thing. But when your camera is off, you're more likely to get distracted. So as a team, we decided that we're not going to force anyone to open cameras, but as a rule, we try to all have our cameras open as much as possible. And if everybody has their cameras off, like, we'll never call out, or when I was working there, we would never call out specific individuals and say, hey, why is your camera off? Like, that's not a good vibe. But if everybody's camera or most people's cameras is off, we'd say, hey, maybe we can turn on some of the cameras so we have more people's videos on. So it seems like a technical, negligible, small detail, but it actually makes a big difference. Another aspect of it is like I said, for onboarding, is to have some time for just non-work communication. So we started every daily, before we got to like what we did, what we're doing, and all of that. We did a short round, 10 minutes of things to share, whatever you want, not work related. And that's where someone would say, oh, I moved to a new apartment yesterday, or, oh, my favorite team won yesterday in whatever match, or I played video games with my friend last night. It was so awesome. Or I had a terrible accident. Everything's fine, but it sucked and I'm in a foul mood. Don't talk to me today. It gives room for you all to kind of, again, strengthen this bond, because if we want to work as a team, we're not just a collection of people executing tasks. In order to work in a team, we have to create this bond that makes us a team. And part of it is like, you don't have to share everything about your life, but to become real people for each other in a way. So I spoke about, let me just make sure I covered all the things. We talked about boundaries. We talked about communications. Right. And then the next aspect, which kind of sips into how to promote your career remotely, ties right back into communication. Because one of the things that can happen more when you work remotely is that you kind of disappear. Like you're doing excellent work, but nobody sees it. And while it can happen in an office, it can happen even more easily when you work remotely. So in order to promote your career remotely, you have to, or it is recommended and it helps if you are more vocal about your successes and not just about your successes. So let's say I've worked on something really, really hard and I got stuck on it. And I got stuck working, and it happened. I got stuck working on this feature for way too long. And I didn't have, we at that time, we were sending daily emails about what we were working on. And that had like a wider spread than just our team. And I didn't have anything new to say. Then I'm still working on this. I'm still working on this. I'm still working on it. And there is this urge of like, just maybe I just won't send the email. And you can, like, nobody pressed you to send the emails. Maybe like I just won't mention it because I don't want to shout out, hey, I'm not making any progress. But the problem is that when you're working completely remotely, when you're not communicating that you're still working on it and it's hard and it's taking a long time, but you are working on it and you are making progress, or you're stuck and you need help, then nobody will know that you're actually working on it. You know, it might give the impression that you're not, or that you're not trying hard, or maybe nobody will even remember what you're working on. And that's also not good, because you want to be seen, you want to be remembered. So when I was in these situations where I'm stuck on a really hard thing that's taking way longer, I did do these emails and I did write in them, and I let some of my frustration show. I even in one of my emails put like an image of all the tests that failed and said, you know, I have like these hundreds, it was hundreds of tests that are now failing and I need to fix it. And I'm in like a whole world of pain. And my boss's boss reached out to me after this email and said, you know, wow, Tamara, this sounds super hard. How can we help you? And instead of feeling like, oh my God, that's terrible, my boss's boss thinks I'm an idiot. Like, be kind to yourself. That's always true, regardless of where you work and how you work and what type of work you do. You know, the right is like, oh my God, you know, your boss's boss knows who you are and he thinks you're working really hard. And that's a good thing. That's a good thing for people to think that you're working really hard at a problem, because some problems are really hard. And at the end, make sure to also vocalize that success. I made a big thing at the end of like, I got, and not just because of, you know, promoting myself, but because I was actually psyched for solving this goddamn problem that took so much of my life. Look at all these white hairs. So when you're working remotely, you want to show up. I don't remember who said that, but there is this speaker that I heard a little while ago, and she said, show up. You know, you want to show up and you want people to notice you. So if there was a meeting that was, because of time differences in work, was like in a very difficult time for me, but I knew that my work will be displayed there. And I knew that it will have a very big exposure. Again, in a big company, there are a lot of people, you know, I'm one of those weirdos who work in Israel, like a completely different time zone than most of the people work in the States. And so I made the effort into coming into this meeting because I wanted people to know and to connect this project with me. I wanted to be there so people can ask questions, and they did, and I can answer them and have a conversation. And people know that this awesome project is not just this random awesome project that, you know, sprung out of magic and little elves that came at night and made it. But hey, there is this person, and she was responsible for making it happen. And that extra effort also shows. So again, my boss's boss reached out back and said, thank you so much for making the effort and coming to this meeting. I know it's in a very difficult time. So, you know, we all feel, especially as women, we feel some unease about promoting ourselves. Like we have this need to stay in the back, but naturally we want to be recognized for our hard work. I am never talking about like taking credit for something you didn't do, or making a fuss about nothing. But I've way too many times seen people, and especially women, not take the credit that they deserve. You know, claim it, reclaim it. It's yours. You actually did the work. You actually went through the effort. You actually won in this battle against the machine. Take credit for it. You're not taking it from anyone. You're just reclaiming it. Otherwise, it's just lost in the ether, you know, or some other person will come and claim it. And that's just bad news, you know, but take your own credit back and make sure that people recognize you for the good work that you do. And then even if you're working remotely, it's like they know who you are and they know what you've done. So that's like my biggest advice on when you're already in a workplace and working remotely. And even if you're not working remotely, even if you're working in an office, like please just reclaim the credit for your good job, and don't be afraid to be vocal about, you know, the battles that you've won and the hard work that you've done. So as I said, just a little bit about building and growing a remote team. And I think this isn't just for managers. I think even you as a part of a team can come and bring up these ideas. One of them, as I said, is about, so it's a lot of taking what I've said and just taking it a step forward. So that actually ties to the previous topic. So I was talking a lot about the work that you do, but it's also about the responsibility that you take and coming up and saying, hey, how about we start all of our daily calls with 10 minutes of just, you know, sharing, where each of us goes and says something about their yesterday evening or something. Or, hey, I would like to have a one-on-one because I feel remotely that we're not having this connection. So I think there is room for us, even not as managers, to come and make suggestions to the team to help improve the team's communication. And it is also a way for you to show that you're ready to take more responsibility. So me as a manager, I was looking, you know, at the senior people in the team and not senior people in my team, and see where they take up initiatives, you know, where they go the extra mile, where they see something bigger than just the task. And it can be something bigger from a technical perspective, from a project perspective, or a product perspective, but it can also be something bigger from the team perspective. So yeah, that's pretty much all I had for you today. I hope you found some good tips, and you're welcome to raise any questions, and you're welcome to find me on LinkedIn. By the way, I'm happy to connect.
Oh, thank you so much, Tamar. I already connected if you didn't notice. Thank you so much for that speech. I really learned a lot. Most of the time we feel that way individually at work, when we are learning, even when we are students, we just feel we are not getting this assignment right. We're not getting this part of the job right. And we just have to try, we just keep putting in the extra work. And sometimes we fail to communicate and tell people around us that this is what we are feeling, because we feel that need to be perfect. But then nobody is. Everybody's learning. Everybody's in the process of figuring things out. So we can always put in the work and reach out to people that could actually help, while explaining also our difficulties and surviving through it with the help of others. Thank you so much for the talk. And I'll just keep an eye on you and other speakers and just reach out every now and then, because you all have a lot to share, a lot of experiences, yeah? And it's always beautiful to listen to women that are actually experiencing these difficulties firsthand and giving solutions to it. So thank you so much. Thank you everyone for joining us today. I'll be handing over to our host, Love it, and peace out.
Okay, thank you, Cynthia. Thank you, Esther, Sierra, Tama, and the other attendees for joining us today. The links, try to get the link, for those asking for the links to the slides, I'll try to get them, and also the video, the recording will also be available soon for everyone. So I guess we have come to the end of today's event. So see you guys. Bye.
Bye,
you.
everyone.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you, Tamar. Thank you, Esther.
Thanks, Cynthia. It was nice meeting you.
Same here.